All right, so you've been struggling with some kind of debilitating elbow pain. It hurts to lift things, it hurts to grip things, and you're trying to figure out, is this tennis elbow or something else? My name is Brad Logue. I'm a physical therapist and the owner of Top Tier Physical Therapy, and I'm going to help you identify if it's tennis elbow, and if it is, what are some ways I can help it go away and stay away? So the first thing we need to do to figure out is it tennis elbow or not is consider the mechanism of injury for tennis elbow, or simply what causes tennis elbow. Most of the time, but not all the time, tennis elbow is caused by an overuse injury. So your telltale sign would be someone that works with their hands a lot. They do a lot of twisting or screwing, repetitive motions all day, every day. That's your typical person that's going to develop some kind of tennis elbow. That being said, there are many other people that don't have those professions or don't do those things on the regular that still develop tennis elbow. So things like lifting in the gym, or even lifting your kids, something where you're doing a lot of lifting and carrying, over time can still lead to tennis elbow. So it is a tendon issue that can sometimes just come out of nowhere. I've seen it in people that have been your typical gym goer for years, and all of a sudden this tennis elbow is becoming an issue. And I've seen it in people that just picked up something new. Maybe it is tennis, or maybe it's some kind of lifting, and they develop the tennis elbow issue. So most of the time it's an overuse injury, but all in all, it's going to be something that can just pop up in someone that uses their arms a lot with lifting and carrying. The other telltale sign of tennis elbow is discomfort or tenderness in the outside of my elbow. So if I palpate myself, or if I poke around in my own elbow, if I start on the bony part of my elbow, the back of my elbow, it's the most bony part there is. If I trace that to the outside, or like the back of my forearm, I'll eventually hit another bony part. Feels like a little bit like a point. That is my lateral epicondyle. Tennis elbow is formerly known as lateral epicondylitis, basically just meaning there is irritation of the tendons that come off the lateral epicondyle. So for some people, that bony spot is very tender. Other times it's just above or just below that part as I get into the tendons, where they're going to feel most of their tenderness. The other telltale sign is when I go through motions of those tendons that come off of that lateral epicondyle, if I load those tendons, is it uncomfortable? So talking about the lateral epicondyle more, we have extensor tendons in our fingers, our finger extensors, our wrist extensors, and then elbow supinators that come off of that bony part of my elbow. So if I go through any resistance of finger extension, so I hold my fingers here and I push down and I try to resist that, or if I hold my wrist flat and I push down and I try to resist that, or I take something like a band and I try and turn away from that band or stretch that band with my palm going up, if any of those things are uncomfortable, it's a pretty good sign that you're dealing with some kind of tennis elbow. So an overuse injury, someone who does a lot of lifting and carrying, I'm tender to the outside of my elbow and going through resisted finger extension, wrist extension, or elbow supination. If any of that is uncomfortable, there's a good chance what you're dealing with is tennis elbow, formerly known as lateral epicondylitis. So if you've gone through those things and you're pretty certain that you have tennis elbow, well, here are some early interventions I can do to help get this pain to go away. So being a tendon issue, we need to introduce load to these tendons. We don't use the term itis anymore, so tendonitis is kind of a term we're trying to get away from, because itis implies inflammation. When people hear inflammation, they think, oh, I should just ice, rest, and take anti-inflammatories. That inflammation will go away, and then my pain will go away. And that, unfortunately, is not the case when it comes to tendon issues, and I would argue most issues. Tendons respond best to load, and we load these tendons by doing strengthening exercises. The exercises you're going to specifically do for tennis elbow, the tendons respond best to, are isometric and eccentric type strengthening exercises. So isometric is when we're holding against the resistance, where the resistance is trying to move us one way, so it may be like wrist flexion, and we're trying to hold against that. And eccentric is where we're slowly like lowering a weight, basically. So if you think of like a simple movement like a bench, an isometric bench would be I press up, and instead of going all the way up, I go halfway up and I hold. That's going to be an isometric hold. An eccentric on a bench press would be I'm at the top and I'm slowly bringing that bar down to my chest. That is an eccentric load. So isometric and eccentric are what we're going to primarily review right now for my lateral elbow tendons. So like we talked about earlier in the video, the movements that are going to be irritating for a tennis elbow are finger extension, wrist extension, and wrist supination. So just like we can use those movements to test if we have tennis elbow or not, we can also use those movements to introduce load to those specific tendons. What we can do with the dumbbell is wrist extension. So I'll show you isometric wrist extension and then eccentric wrist extension. So something that you can support your arm on. It may be a countertop, maybe a table. You could also do this supported on your thigh. Just something where you're going to have your forearm resting on a stable surface. So if I just sit here, that weight's going to drop down. It's going to pull me into wrist flexion. All I'm going to do, extend my wrist to neutral or maybe just beyond neutral. And you can kind of see my extensor muscles turn on all the way down to that lateral epicondyle when I do this. My isometric movement for this is going to be just a hold. So I'm going to try and hold this for something like 30 to 45 seconds. And I'm going to do a few sets of this. So maybe something like 3 to 4. So that's going to be the isometric hold. The eccentric, I can use a heavier weight and I'm going to help the weight up for the concentric portion and then slowly lower that weight down for the eccentric portion. So I'm slowly lowering the weight, slowly elongating those tendons against some kind of stress or load. And I'll go through a couple rounds of this. So I might do 5 to 10 at a time for 2 or 3 sets of this. So helping it on the way up and controlling it nice and slow on the way down. Now, as you may have thought about earlier, this may be something that's a little bit uncomfortable. Remember, we just used these movements to test, is this tennis elbow or not? And if it was painful, then we were pretty certain that we had some kind of tennis elbow symptoms going on. So doing something like this with the weight may be uncomfortable, but we need it to be just that, uncomfortable, not painful. So when we're talking about tendon issues, we know doing nothing, so resting, icing, and taking anti-inflammatories, that's not going to help the tendon. But we also don't want to do too much to overstress this tendon and just constantly piss it off and kick the can down the road. So we want to go somewhere right in the middle of that, which on the pain monitoring model, so on a 0 to 10 scale, we don't want pain to get above a 5. If you're not a numbers person, you're going to choose discomfort instead of pain. So if I'm going through this hold and when I get here, like this really, really hurts, I need to drop the weight down or I need to shorten my hold. I would argue the longer the hold, the better. So your first go-to should be to lighten the weight. Same thing with the eccentric. If I'm coming up and as I'm going down, like I get to a point where like, oh, this really hurts and I want to stop, it's too much, you got to back off because this is not a no pain, no gain thing. If you're just causing yourself pain, think of it as you're just re-irritating that elbow. So we're just delaying healing even further. We want a tolerable load, which is one of discomfort and not pain. So wrist extension with a dumbbell, and now we're going to go over elbow supination with a band. All right, so moving into the banded supination. So again, supination is another movement that if we have tennis elbow, doing that against resistance is going to be uncomfortable. So tying the band to something that's going to not move. So you can use a squat rack, you can use a door frame or a door jamb, your bed, something that's just not going to tilt over if you add resistance to it. I'm going to grab the band with a palm down grip. You kind of want the band at the, if your arm's down by your side, you kind of want it at the height of your elbow. So grabbing it with a palm down grip, how I'm going to isometrically load this is I'm just going to turn my wrist up towards a neutral group or grip, neutral grip or just beyond neutral. So here's neutral, here's just beyond neutral. And again, I'm going to hold this for something like 30 to 45 seconds, finding a resistance that's discomfort but not pain. So with the band, if I only have, let's say I don't have a lighter band than red, I can just simply step closer to the origin of the band or where I have it tied to, and that'll make it a little bit less resistance. If it's not enough, like I'm not feeling any discomfort here, maybe I need to step out to add more resistance here. So holding for 30 to 45 seconds here, should feel it in the outside of the elbow. You may also feel it in the back of your shoulder and some of those rotator cuff muscles. To load these tendons, the supinators eccentrically, I'm going to pull the band into that starting position with my other arm, my other hand, and I'm going to slowly rotate down into that palm down position. So now I'm using help to start in the palm up position or starting in the supinated position, and I'm slowly moving down to this palm down or this pronated position. And again, just like we did with the dumbbell, 5 to 10 reps here for 3 to 4 sets, choosing discomfort but not pain. So by no means are these the only 2 exercises that are going to help with tennis elbow. They are just 2 probably of the more simple ones we can do to hopefully calm these tendons down. Some of the more complex ones that I like to give people are a behind the back isometric elbow extension with like a shoulder abduction. And again, we're holding this one. And then I also like to give an isometric upright row with some kind of plate, because I work with a lot of CrossFitters and barbell athletes, and sometimes an upright row or like a high pull is something that sets that elbow off. So there's plenty of other exercises you can give to target those lateral elbow extensor muscles, but those are going to be more along the lines of addressing pain in the short term. So obviously as PTs, we want to get people in as little pain as possible, always shooting for 0 pain. And those eccentric and isometric exercises for the extensors and supinators are very helpful for that. However, as PTs, we want to find the underlying cause of this issue. So we don't want you to continue to experience this down the road. We don't want you to have to keep coming back to us for the same thing. And we need to find the root cause of the elbow pain to do this. Sometimes, again, not all the times, but this can originate as a shoulder issue. So even though the tennis elbow is, we like to think of as an overuse injury, there may be a reason for that overuse, especially in some of these barbell athletes or your regular gym goers, or even tennis players. So the concept here is if my shoulder is not doing its job with whatever movement I'm doing, so whether it's swinging a tennis racket, pushing something overhead, pulling like a row or a pull up or a lat pull down, if my shoulders are lacking, my elbow is going to have to pick up the slack. So the less work my shoulder's doing, the more work my elbow's doing, and now all of a sudden I'm having this increase in stress to the elbow that I wasn't seeing before, and eventually the elbow kind of starts to talk back to you and let you know, hey, I'm being overloaded here, and that's when tennis elbow sets in. So as we are getting the elbow pain to go away with those 2 easy exercises, we should also be adding in some scapular and rotator cuff exercises to potentially clear any contributions from the shoulder to this elbow pain. So we're going to go over a couple of my favorite shoulder exercises to do here that will probably load the elbow as well. So you will likely feel these in the elbow, but they should help with strengthening the shoulder blades and the rotator cuff. So we're going to keep it simple, just like we did with the elbow exercises using a band or a dumbbell, something that you'll probably find at any gym or you may have at your house as part of your home gym. First one we're going to do is a face pull with an overhead press. So using my band here, tying it to about eye level, I'm going to grab it with a grip that's about shoulder width apart. And as a face pull, I'm thinking of pulling this band towards my forehead. I like to add a little bit of a twist to this. While you're pulling towards your forehead, you're also pulling your arms apart. So if I show you this way, I'm not just pulling here, I'm also pulling here. Okay, so pulling to my forehead, separating my hands. Once I get to my forehead, I'm going to press overhead without letting that band pull me forward. The overhead press is probably going to be your most limiting point in the exercise here. So I may need to step closer and make the face pull easier. That way the band's not pulling me way forward here. So face pull, I could be way back. And this is easy for the face pull as far as resistance. But then as I press overhead, if it's too much, my arm's going to come too far forward. I want to be as overhead as I can with those arms. So pull, press overhead, and then I'm reversing that to finish out the movement. And again, going through a couple of reps here, something like 8 to 10 across 2, 3, 4 sets. All right, so using the same dumbbell that I was doing my wrist extensions with earlier, something light, we don't need anything heavy here. We're gonna go through simply T's and Y's. So if you're a baseball player, if you were in PT before for a shoulder issue, you probably did T's and Y's. They're very simple, but very effective. Sometimes you don't need any weight with this one, which is pretty convenient if you're gonna be doing these at home and you don't have a weight. But nonetheless, we can add resistance to make this a little bit more challenging. So we're going to use the bench to get set up in this modified quadruped position. And you're going to think, man, this looks a lot like when I do the rows at the gym. Well, you would be right. And rows at the gym are going to be a great exercise to help with improving my scapular strength and maybe addressing why I'm having tennis elbow in the first place. So the setup is the same. For the T and Y, I'm just going to make a T with my arm. So I'm coming up here to the side, whereas you can imagine if I was doing this with 2 arms, I would look like a T. Couple of reps here, and then I'm going to turn into a Y. So now I'm kind of lifting at a diagonal in a Y. So if I showed you from the side, this would be a T, and this would be a Y. Okay. With the T, what you're thinking of is I'm trying to, if I had someone's finger between my shoulder blades, I'm trying to pinch their finger with my shoulder blade to lift my arm to the side. With the Y, you're thinking I'm taking that same shoulder blade, so it's my left arm, I'm taking my left shoulder blade and I'm trying to stick it in my back pocket. So I'm not shrugging when I do either of these. I'm pinching my shoulder blades together for the T and then sticking my shoulder blade in the back pocket for the Y. Just like the face pulls, 8 to 10 reps, 3 to 4 sets. Doing these over time, you do them once, they're not magic. It's not going to help. You got to repeatedly do these. So in any kind of back or shoulder day, some people already do these exercises, which are great. If you're not doing them and you are having some kind of tennis elbow issue, you can simply add these into your back and shoulder day, and it's just going to feel like a part of your regular routine versus something in addition to your typical daily routine. All right, so hopefully after watching this, you have a better idea if you're dealing with tennis elbow or not. And if you are, you have some 4 simple, easy exercises that you can do at the gym or at home that are going to help reduce that elbow pain in the short term and then hopefully clear up any shoulder issues that may be contributing to this pain. As with any kind of rehab, you have to give this time. So if you do these exercises once or twice, or you do them for even 1 or 2 weeks, you may not notice any immediate effects. I would argue that the longer that elbow has been bothering you, the longer it's going to take for it to get better. But this is something, regardless, you're going to have to give weeks or maybe even months. So small little gains over time are what you'll probably notice, where my pain is not intense, my pain is not as frequent, or I can lift heavier before I start to notice my elbow pain. Things like that, that'll kind of give you the sign that, hey, you're heading down the right path, and you just need to keep doing what you're doing to get to the point where you're not having elbow pain anymore. So hope you guys found this video helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next video.